is going to focus more on like your efficiency, safety, business outcomes, stuff like that. So durability and materials. In residential, everyone wants pretty stuff. They don't care about price. They don't really care about how long it's going to last. They just want their house to look beautiful. So it's purely aesthetics. Where commercial, you really need to think about durability, what it's going to be used for, how long it needs to last, the areas that it's in, stuff like that. So regulations and compliance. Residential is not that heavily regulated. Obviously, there are some safety things when building a house for someone, but it's not that regulated, where commercial is a lot more to consider. So fire, accessibility, emergency exits, signage on big buildings. Everything needs to be well signage that people can find their way around. Budget and timelines. Residential budgets, they can vary depending on the size of the project. They can be flexible at times, although I say that everyone comes in with a R1 million budget on their house and then we end up with 2.5 and there's some domestic fights. And so, yeah, it is flexible, but not that flexible. Where commercial is very much ROI driven. Time is money. There's a lot of pressure with commercial, especially on retail projects, restaurants. You're on very tight deadlines. They have grand openings. You can't be an hour late. Like, you have to be ready and you have to stick to budget. Branding and marketing. So obviously a residential, there's no branding or marketing. It's just all about what the client's personal taste is. Obviously, as the designer, you're still going to try and direct them with their personal taste to create a finished product that's cohesive. With commercial, branding is critical. The interiors must reflect the company ethos, it must reflect their brand, it must interact well with their customers. So scale and complexity. Residentials, smaller spaces with fewer decision makers. But having said that, like I said, when there's fewer decision makers and it's a personal space, it can get complicated. You can end up being a psychologist and having to do a lot more than you thought you had to just get a decision made on a kitchen countertop. So these projects can also take a lot longer, residential projects. Sometimes I've been on residential projects that are like 18 months because decisions can't be made. Maybe they want more expensive stuff, so now they need to come up with more money. Commercial stuff is a lot easier. As much as there's more decision makers, a commercial client knows what they want, they have their budgets, and they just give you the project, the brief, and they want you to run with it. Okay, so let's discuss some of the considerations when you are designing a commercial space. So user experience in the physical space is important. You want to make sure that a space it's not too big, it's not too cluttered or overwhelming for staff. So you want to take into consideration how the physical space is going to be used and by who when you're designing it. Color psychology is quite a big thing. You're obviously going to work with the brand's corporate identity and you're going to work with the colors that they have. But you can also consider things like, you'll find a lot in hospitals, there's a lot of blue because blue is calming, it's also seen as clean. Red in an emergency room because it's a call to action, it's like emergency. Black is seen as very sophisticated, chic. So you would want to consider that as well as the corporate identity when you're designing. The psychology of spaces and how it affects human behavior. So again, this is, let's say you have an open plan office space. You want to make sure that you have a lot of storage space, that you've thought out how staff are going to use the space. Is it hot desks? Is it desks that they're at? So that you have an uncluttered space where they feel calm within their space. It's not overcrowded. There's not files and paper and stuff lying everywhere. So it's a productive space. Including biophilic design in spaces is important as well. And this is across the board, whether it's going to be retail or an office or a hotel. So humans naturally enjoy nature and it calms us. So when you add green into spaces, it automatically gives this feeling of calmness and a home feeling. Obviously, making your design sustainable is important as well. So sourcing local materials, using energy efficient solutions and things like that are also important, especially on your commercial projects, because obviously their bills and things are going to be high and they want to have a sustainable design. Then translating a brand's identity into a physical environment. So this isn't only about their CI and incorporating their colors. You want a customer to be able to come in and sort of understand what the brand is about. So let's say it's an office and they do logistics. Maybe you're going to have wallpaper on the wall of big trucks, or you're going to bring in elements of logistics, maps, things like that. So just visually, without even reading an about me on their website, you know what this company does. Making sure materials are fit for you. So again, that's just making sure that you're using a hard body porcelain tile on a floor that's going to be high traffic, or things that are easy to clean, carpets that are easy to clean in offices and things like that. Energy efficient lighting is important, as I said, as well as the color of the lighting. So you get different colors on the lighting, and they're going to range from the warm through to cool. And sometimes a warm would work better, sometimes cool. Sometimes we call it daylight, the one with the white light in the middle. So these are things to consider as well when you're designing, and obviously to specify them accordingly to make sure that the correct lights are used to translate the design that you want. Custom furniture versus off-the-shelf solutions. So depending on the project, again, and the budget. So often in restaurants, we will do custom feature items. So it will be like the bar area, or we'll do key features, and then everything else is sourced off the shelf, just because from a cost perspective, like even if we do custom tabletops, perhaps you still want to do an off-the-shelf base just to keep costs down, and then you can spend more money on making the bar like more amazing. Multifunctional furniture for smaller spaces. So again, maybe someone has a smaller office space. Things to consider is maybe you have a bench seat that's got storage in it, or because floor space in an office is so valuable, start considering vertical walls, how you can integrate extra storage or extra use of those spaces as well. Building codes and safety compliance, again, it's just because there are a lot of them within the commercial sector. So when you're designing, you need to consider all of those extensively. Obviously, for when you submit to council, you need those approvals. So you need to think about all of those. And lastly, acoustic design. So again, I'm going to refer back to offices. Even in here, you guys have acoustic panels on the ceiling. You're going to design in areas that require acoustics. So big open plan areas where there might be a lot of people. But that said, as well, you may want to have soundproof offices for CEOs, meeting rooms that need private spaces. There's even booths now where they are completely soundproof, where you can take a private cord if you need to. Okay, so this is our general workflow on how we work from start to finish on a project. So obviously we're going to get a brief from the client, as well as their corporate identity and a general idea of the look and feel that they want, the direction that they want to go into. We'll further develop this design with them and send them more images of ideas that we have after we've discussed the brief with them. We will also do mood boards. And once we ask a lot of questions at this point with our clients as well. We want to understand how their business works, and we want to understand how they want to portray their business to their clients. So once all of that is done, we start with 3D. So we use SketchUp. We can render from SketchUp. It's versatile in the sense that it works well with Revit and AutoCAD as well. So translating into 2D drawings is a lot quicker. And we also present this to the client. So there's no misunderstanding of what our vision is for the project and what they have in mind. And it's quick and easy to change a wallpaper if the client doesn't like it before they pay for anything, as opposed to on site. So once everything's signed off, we'll start with our construction pack and our council drawing pack. So sometimes it's the same pack of drawings. If it's not a very complicated design, we'll just take our construction pack and use it for council submission, or we'll just take out some of the details and extra stuff and make a council pack for council. And then at this point, if we're doing full turnkey, we will start ordering furniture, fittings. We'll have a schedule of when everything is going to be fitted, how it's all going to be delivered, timelines, and all that kind of stuff as well. We like to keep our clients up to date. We all know that communication with the client is very important. It keeps them not grumpy. So we have a WhatsApp group that we always do with each of our projects, and then we will add the client to that with our contractors. So it can be live on site. People can take photos, or I've installed these now, and they send it. The client can look at it because a lot of them are busy when they want to, and they know that there's progress on site and things are happening. The project is then handed over to the client. Obviously, we snag as much as we can as possible. No one likes having to go back and fix 100 things, but we're all human as well, and sometimes there's things that need to be fixed. So we give them 30 days, and yeah, then they can send us a snag list, and we will go sort that out. Okay, so this is our first case study. So this particular client is called Sculpt. Her logo was gray and white, and her business is an aesthetics clinic. So she does IVs, she does obviously lashes, she does a lot of body and facial kind of beauty things. So her client is predominantly a woman. She wanted a space that was obviously clinical in feel, but she also wanted to have a feeling of being an art gallery, because she says the human body is an art gallery and it's getting sculpted. So we wanted to incorporate those, and we brought in little touches of gold just because the gray and white is quite cold. So that gold will just bring in a little element of something pretty. On the lighting on this, again, we went with the white daylight so that everything is clean and chic and smooth and looks bright. And we added curtains for some privacy for the IV bars, so those can close a bit just if you want privacy, just because her client is also an upper LSM client, so they want a little bit of special treatment. In the reception area as well, we have a small display for products that she can sell, and all the furniture, we wanted it to have not a hospital feel, even though it's an aesthetic clinic, we wanted it to have a bit of a homey feel. So it's upholstered, it's got like couches, it's comfortable. This again is the couches and the seating, just making it comfortable. We brought in the element of get your drip on, little neon light on the side there, just to make it a little quirky, maybe a little bit arty. This is the lighting, which is just a feature light underneath the reception counter. So when you come in, it just draws your attention. You know that that is definitely the reception counter where you need to go. Again, this is just the drip area. So the little gold drip bag holders, we custom made those for her so that they would be gold. And on the wall, there's a closer photo. We did molds of hands. So the idea is to put a product into those hands. And there were 5 of us. One of those hands is even my hand, and they come out of the wall. So again, this is just bringing that art gallery feel into the space. Here you can see her logo. Again, on the wall, we've sculpted out the S of her logo onto the wall so that it's this 3-dimensional sculpted effect again. So there's a close-up of those hands. And then on the right-hand side, you're going to see the passage to the treatment rooms. There's 5 treatment rooms. It's a very long, straight, white passage. So at the end of this passage, we did the entire wall in this textured kind of look with a light on it. So it's white on white, and it's just about sculpting and texture, but it just draws your attention to the end of that passage. This is the little detail for our signage for the bathroom. It's obviously a unisex bathroom, so we wanted something, again, simple. And we brought in a wallpaper that we custom printed for her. Again, it's a little bit feminine because predominantly her client is going to be a woman, and it's got the art feel to it. This is one of the treatment rooms. So again, furniture that we chose here, we didn't want it to be too office or industrial. We wanted to have like a homey feel like a side cabinet, have some art, bring the flowers in again, so there's a feminine element to it. So this is the end of that passage with that whole sculpted look. And then down the passage on the ceiling, we had the words hello, so that when the client comes in, it's in gold. So just something different as well that draws your attention away from the fact that you're down this very long white passage. And then here in the seating area, a great thing for a lot of retail that we always incorporate is a TV. So if the client has specials or packages or new products, it's great while people sit there waiting for their treatment to be able to look at the TV and see it's really going to upsell. And we also have a unit in front of that where there's coffee. She has some champagne and waters and things like that for her client as well, just so that it welcomes them. This is the next case study. So this client is a corporate travel agency. They predominantly do, obviously, businesses, and they focus a lot on doing travel for government officials. So their branding is red and yellow is their corporate colors. They're very quirky, and they're very focused on making a fun environment for their staff. So we wanted to bring in all the elements of travel. So there's going to be a lot of world maps. There's going to be a lot of country names, a lot of stuff like that. The design is industrial with elements of the green again to bring in the biophilic design so that it feels more calming, because obviously industrial can be quite cold and hard. So this is the waiting area. We have a green wall saying hello in a whole lot of different languages. So it's welcoming the client in straight away. This specific wall, again, is for the staff. So there'll be the employee of the month. They wanted other posters to put of quotes and inspiration, or where the next destination is, or things like that. So this is more for staff, this wall, and for inspiring them. This is the main meeting room area of this office. So we did things to the glass with privacy. We used the London Underground map. We used frosted, like, of New York skyline, and then we also used different names for some of the meeting rooms. So we have a New York and a Tokyo one. Those two specific meeting rooms are fully wrapped around all the walls with the New York, like, city or Tokyo. So when you're sitting in that room, it feels like you immerse, and they're small rooms, so it is quite an immersive experience. So this is one of those rooms. Excuse the table, sorry, they haven't finished setting it up, so that looks like a bit of a mess. Didn't stay like that. But it's a little four-seater little meeting room, and you can see how all the walls, and then obviously there's the glass in the front. So this is just another view of the other side of the meeting room. So we also use wording, inspirational stuff for the staff. We brought in some wood elements as well, so that it can just warm up the space again, just because it is an industrial space and the whole ceiling is concrete. This is that London Underground. So this is their main meeting room. And so we did the London Underground map frosted just for something different instead of just plain frosting, and then it's going back to their branding. This is a waiting area for clients if they're waiting to come into a meeting. So again, you can see acoustic panels on that ceiling, because the ceiling is a exposed ceiling, so that'll dampen sound when people sit there. And they've also made that into a coffee station. So again, welcoming the client in, making them feel at home before they book their trip. This is one of the staff canteens. They have two. This is the downstairs one. So we made like a little fun space at the back with this whole travel thing, like graffiti style. And then there's a neon light on the side there that says teamwork makes the dream work. And then going up the stairs, we wanted to use words that pertain to travel. So obviously a lot of their very high-end clients will go upstairs and meet with the directors in their office and stuff. And again, because obviously they do a lot of government stuff, they wanted to honor Nelson Mandela as well. So we did a huge printed poster. It's the entire double volume of the stair at the top there. This is the second canteen. So here there's even a little mini kitchen. So staff can order food and stuff. Again, for productivity of staff, it's nice to have on-site fun things to do, places to get food, because your staff are not really leaving then, and they're not going to be away further for lunch, get stuck in traffic. They're more productive because they're staying in the space. The seating area of this space, we did, that's a black chalkboard wall. So staff can write, you know, where they think the next destination should be, or what's the best destination at the moment, or draw things and just have fun with the space as well while they're relaxing and eating their lunch. So this is one of the sections of the office where we incorporated a custom wallpaper. It's got some of their ethos that they have. Obviously the red is coming in. There's world maps that show you that it's travel and stuff like that. So we just bring in some of the corporate color. This is part of the upstairs staff area as well. So again, we had a very long wall here that was very boring, and we had a lot of wallpaper and colors going on the other wall. So what we decided to do on this wall is do little like airplane windows. And in each airplane window, there's a view of something you might be able to see out of an airplane in the world. So it just makes it a little more interesting instead of walking along this boring passage. This is another staff area. So we again have customized branding on the wall on the left there. And that glass is frosted with that branding continuing, so it doesn't break. So the managers in these offices can still see out to their staff, and yeah, there isn't a break in that branding. This is another part of the open plan area. So we put their mission statement on the wall there, and then we had a nice big airplane so everyone can think about where they're traveling. And this is another section across the way. So this section they are dealing a lot more with different places in the world. So we put a world map at the back for them. And on that map it's very detailed. So there are all the countries, so they can go there if they want to and actually look for a place if they're not sure. This is one of the director's offices. There's two, so we did this custom unit for them. Obviously they wanted it to look quite corporate, quite modern. There's some display areas because they have some awards that they've won, and also there's chains and gifts they've been given. And they like a big TV also to be able to present when they have a high-end client in there. They can use the TV to present packages and things to them as well. This is their branding upstairs into their CEO or their directors areas. Again, they love their staff. So in the basement, we have a full-on entertainment area with there's a poker table, foosball, pool table, there's gaming machines, a projector. So staff can come in here. They have events with their staff, where they have team building, and they'll have just hang out together down here. And there's a bar in there as well for them. So obviously there's alcohol, and we've got a fridge in there with drinks and everything as well. Yeah, so that's everything. Is there any questions?
Any questions? Yeah. It's a really great presentation. So, I mean, you mentioned how when you are designing or taking out projects for residential clients, it's more about their taste, right?
Yes.
Taking on projects for commercial clients, it's more about their branding.
Correct.
So, I wanted to know, when you're working with both of those kind of clients, how much of your own taste you put or get to still in the work?
So I would say probably on the residential, clients will pick me because I would have a personal taste even for my own home. So they would probably pick me more based on my own personal taste and knowing that I can implement that design and it's kind of their taste as well, if you know what I mean. Where with a corporate, I'm kind of sticking more to the brand, the colors, it's less of my personal taste, definitely.
So it's a lot more easier for you to sort of bring yourself into the residential work.
Yes, with regards to my taste, but I find commercial work a lot more rewarding because it's each project is so different. So even, for example, when I get a new client, let's say I'm doing a grocery store, I will research the psychology behind that grocery store. So when people go into a grocery store, they turn right. You'll notice that fresh produce is always in the front of a grocery store because they want that to welcome you. They put the eggs and the bread at the back so that you walk through the store and you will buy more. Most stores, bar Woolworths, have small little 400 by 400 tiles on the floor so that when you push in your trolley and it's going, you slow down because it sounds like you're going way too fast, and now you're looking at more products and you're shopping for more stuff. So I'll research because, I mean, there's going to be projects where I'm designing something for the first time and I don't know everything. So I highly recommend researching the psychology and how to design a space efficiently so that it functions for that specific brand. Yeah. Yes.
Thanks for the
You're welcome.
I just want to know, I've experienced something. I found that our retailers of products and materials
Yes.
go through different seasons. And that determines the style of what the interior of the house will look, because those are products the clients see.
Yes.
You find that as a problem because I found that when I'm doing work for a client, there's something that I like and I think it will suit the space, but it's just not available in the market anymore. And we can't find those products anymore because everywhere is only selling a certain series of things.
Yes.
Do you find that that is holding us as designers back or interior designers well?
To be honest, no. So I try to think out the box per se. So a lot of my residential, I will try to keep a relatively muted palette. And if we're going to go with design trends and neon purple is the latest color, then I'll use scatters, vases, maybe some art that's easy to replace and bring it in like that. So when they're bored of it or when a trend changes, it's a lot easier to change that stuff. Let's say you have a client now, neon purple isn't in anymore, but that's what they want. What I'll do then is I will custom print wallpapers, I will print scatters, I will find ways to incorporate it in the way that I want. It will still make it a unique space and make my client happy, even if I can't find the product. There are a lot of custom things. Yes, custom comes with the price tag, but again, a lot of your residentials, when they want something, they're willing to pay that price tag to get what they want.
And then lastly, what currently is your greatest inspiration towards your design style? What happenings are you seeing that's influencing your style now?
So if I have to think of an inspirational person per se, it would be Studio A. I do love Tristan. He's very creative with the stuff he comes up with. With regards to general inspiration, I will try and I'll use Pinterest. I will try and see trends and international trends. And I just try to think out the box with each client. I think of ways that you can do things differently, incorporate different textures, just different visuals. And again, because I believe that there are people who make custom stuff. So you can come up with an idea that's a bit crazy and you can find someone to make it. Even if it's an artist who's going to do some fancy chandelier installation for you, that's a key feature. Thank you.
One question online, an interesting question. I'm just going to bring that up here to see. So the question is, what's one design innovation you think society isn't ready for yet, but will be in 50 years?
Does it have to be a physical design thing or a tool that designers use? Because I'm going to go straight to AI, to be honest.
Yeah.
Everyone doesn't particularly like it, but it saves a lot of time. And I think I don't think it's going to take away our jobs, but I just think it's going to make us a lot more efficient. Because even if someone goes and AIs their restaurant or their living room, they don't know where to get stuff. They don't understand materials and they need a hard body tile as opposed to a ceramic, and they're going to mess it up. So they're still going to need us. But yeah, AI, I think, get very creative with AI.
Thanks for that. Anyone with any other questions? Online, everyone good? I think there's just been a lot of compliment on the work in online comments, so that's great. Teams. Let's just see, there's a couple of people typing online.
I
didn't hear.
When deciding to take on clients, what factors do you most heavily calculate on? Is it budget? Is it style? Is it type of project?
So each one is so different. It's hard to pin that down because, sometimes I'll have, for example, on Sculpt, I love that concept and what she wanted to do, but we had an exceptionally tight budget. So even on that reception counter, that is not marble. We had to use Formica because she didn't have a budget for it. So that was challenging in the sense of finding ways to stick within that budget and still having a finished product that looked aesthetically pleasing. So each project is completely different. I may have some where it's quite a boring project. Maybe it's a huge office. It's literally just adding soundproofing stuff and decks in huge open plans. So it's not very creative, but it's quick and you do make a lot of money. So the ones in between that where it's more fun and more creative kind of weigh out all of that. So yeah, each one, and each client is different. You're dealing with an individual, even if it's corporate, everyone has their own tastes and their own ideas for the brand.
And how do you make distinction between beneficial
So when I have a client, I can see that's going to be difficult. What I'll start to do is I won't be negotiable on my fees. It'll be take it, because that'll often then they will rather go shop elsewhere. That's always a good starting point. Look, I have had clients where they insist on certain colors or finishes that I feel are not going to work. Often I will use my 3D or I will render, and then hopefully visually they see, oh, hang on, she is right. That's not looking so great. And I'll show them what my vision is. So we'll put them side by side and say, that's what you were thinking. This is what I'm thinking. And more often than not, they will go with what I'm thinking. So that's where I feel the visual tool is important, because a lot of clients as well, they don't understand how we think. They don't understand 2D drawings. They can't visualize the space. So it just helps them, and it just prevents a lot of tension. Sadly, yes. So within our fees, generally, we will offer like 2 changes to designs that is included to that, but it's not a redesign. So if a client is highly confused and still unsure, we will start to charge to redesign stuff. But I always try and establish right in the beginning exactly what they want. That's why I say ask a lot of questions. Show them more images then. Be like, is this the direction? Is this the, and they'll tell you, and I always tell my clients, I'm never going to be offended if you tell me you don't like something I show you. I want you to be happy. So be honest with me and let's produce something we're both happy with. Yeah. Yes.
So my question kind of relates a bit about that. How do you establish, like, if with residential plans, how do you establish your timeline and like the cut of space? Because you said like some things can take you like maybe half a year, some things can take 18 months. So at what point do you start seeing like the indecisiveness of the client, or maybe they keep changing with the seasons? And what point do you start like establishing, okay, we need to start working within this time frame or within this time frame?
Okay, so obviously communication with your client is important. So if you're starting to run behind because they can't choose a tile, just make them aware that they are holding up their own project. We also will do a lot of variation orders then. So if things start to go over or they start changing a lot of stuff, you're going to charge for that. You're going to do a variation order on the time or on the product so that you are covering that cost. Yeah.
Yes.
So I would say my most challenging project, and it's more based on maybe the location. I do a lot of work in Africa and predominantly in the DRC. So the problem there is sometimes there's material shortages, so projects will run late. There isn't always the skill that's required, so you'll have to bring people in, it gets costly, and then you'll have to organize that. I'm sure you guys know there was recently the war there again, so that held stuff back, there's been delays. That said, it's still a good place to work. There's an 8% economy growth rate. There's just cranes everywhere in Kinshasa. There's a lot of opportunity there, but it's not an easy environment. But when you go there, there is an infrastructure. You have to go there with an open mind and a lot of patience. And then you'll have fun.
There's a question online.
Yeah, especially on the residential with regards to budgets. Like I said, especially when you have couples, you know, maybe she wants this Italian couch that's R1 million and the husband is like, whoa, 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 it's like a 150K budget. So because they can get more money sometimes, it's not like a corporate where there is a very specific budget. Sometimes they'll be able to work with that and you'll be able to get, but again, it's always something that holds up a project now, because now you'll be looking at the budget, things are changing, or you will try and draw budget from somewhere else as well. So maybe you'll say, fine, we want extra for this couch. Maybe we don't buy the top of the range Hans Grow Attack, we go with a more entry level, you know, things. So you're still getting a quality product, but you're trying to get money from somewhere else as well, depending on how important the specific element that they want is that's going to now make them go over budget.
Cool. I think let's do a last check. Is any other questions from anyone in the session? Great. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us. Hope everyone enjoyed the talk. I think it was fantastic.
Thank you.
Ruben Opperman, I see you raised your hand. It's been just a reaction instead. All right, perfect. We're going to give a few minutes just before the next presenter, and so a bit of a just quick stretch, and then we'll take it from there. Thanks very much.
Hello? Hello?
We're going to start in 2 seconds. Good morning, Jared. How are you?
Morning, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Perfect.
Can you see these slides?
We can see the slides. We can see you as well.
Okay, great.
Great, great. Right, I'll quickly introduce you. We're I think 4 minutes early, but I think that's perfect. So just for everyone in here, welcome our next presenter. This is Jared Nelson from DARP in Cape Town. Jared also studied with me in UJ. And I think the work that they are doing are absolutely spectacular. And I'm gonna hand over to Jared to showcase what they are doing. So thank you for joining us for these talks, Jared.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thanks. That's a very generous introduction. It's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me, and good morning to everybody that side and everybody that's online. So I was asked to give a talk, and mine's going to be a little bit different. We'll obviously touch on what I do, but one of the key things that I believe quite strongly in is the business of design. So I thought I would take you through a little bit of thinking on that. So I run 2 businesses. One is called Dark Horse, one is called Studio Nelson. Dark Horse is our product business, and Studio Nelson is our services business. I studied architecture at UJ many moons ago, what it feels like now. And then I studied business at Stellenbosch Business School. And I'm also a registered professional with SARCAP, the South African Council for the Architectural Profession. Before starting Dark Horse, this is me and my wife. We started it together in 2011, so it's been quite a while. I worked for a few practices. Some of the ones that you might know of is Paragon, M2K, and Sayota down in Cape Town. So I've been in Cape Town for 15 years now, and this is where we started our studio. So what we do is product and services. We've been doing it for a while, kind of honing our skills and kind of figuring out our way. And I'm just going to show you a little bit about that. We've been very fortunate to garner quite a few clients. These are obviously a little bit more of the name clients that we work with and we supply product to for various projects. We have a variety of projects in a variety of different sectors. So obviously there's a bit of retail, mainly offices for the retail clients. There's a couple of hospitality clients that we work with. We do quite a few lodges and that sort of thing into Africa, and then hotels. And obviously there's been this big rise in managed apartments. So we do a fair amount of work in that space, but it always varies. And that's one of the beauties of product, is that if you design products that obviously fits a variety of spaces, you have this opportunity to work with a variety of clients. And that's very much part of our ethos as a design brand and a design company. We want products that are that will last. Obviously, it's a big part of what we do, but also that can fit into a variety of spaces. And we kind of think of that being more classic. So here are just a few shots of our product and some beautiful projects. We work at the higher LSM of the market, people who can spend a little bit more money for better quality and appreciate design on the whole. We don't really want to fight at the lower end of the market for a variety of reasons, but I'll get into a little bit of that later. We have quite a strong footing in seating. It's probably our biggest category across all of the furniture that we produce. We produce in all categories, decor, tables, lighting, shelving, storage, but seating is kind of like our key hero segment. Just a quick look at a couple of different pieces and different spaces. As you can see, we've got residential, we've got commercial, but the product doesn't change. And that's sort of a key aspect of our business, is that we don't necessarily work on custom work. We design for the brand, and then we take that brand out into the world. And we say, this is what you should buy. It's already tried and tested. And it kind of reduces a lot of the complexity for our clients, giving them something that is obviously not completely commercial, a little bit more boutique, but doesn't mean that they have to spend all that time and development and cost on getting something to fit their brief. On the services side, we work predominantly in residential. We've got a variety of different projects on the go. We opened the studio about 4 years ago, so a lot of our projects are like on site now or have just finished. So it's a very exciting time for us as we move more into that space. Typically, residential we find does come with all of its, pros and cons, but we enjoy it because we're changing spaces, and we very much believe in how people engage with spaces, how it affects their life, how it affects their health, mental health, and general happiness. So it's very much a exciting space to see when people are spending hard-earned money to realize things that, intrinsically change them versus, when we do work in commercial, then it's obviously a different beat. So what I wanted to speak to you about today, predominantly in terms of having a business lens for design, is who are you creating value for? And I think as designers, at least on my journey in design, there's a lot around finding, it's all about you, especially the way I came through the system was very much about, being an independent thinker, being, the creative sort of hero, And all of those things can still be true, but the big thing is you need to be solving a problem. And if you solve a problem, you can find a customer. So, and then that's where value creation sort of takes place. And that's essentially what we're going to be talking about a little bit today. So who is this customer and what makes them buy from you? And that becomes your unique selling proposition, but it really is around how do you create value. So a little bit of basics. So you take your sales, you minus your costs, and you get to profit, right? And this is the crux of the matter. And as simple as this is, it doesn't really change. And it's really fundamental to understand that. But to sell it, you need to add value. Somebody needs to be able to take their hard-earned money and give it to you for the thing that you provide. This could be for product or for services. And as we go through the slide deck, you'll see it can be either if it's for yourself as operating as a designer independently, entrepreneur, or as an employee in a studio or a bigger practice. And so then the question is, what is valuable? And that's where we get to a conversion process. So when we look at a product, we take raw materials, right? So raw timber, raw steel, raw leather. We then take it through a conversion process. We need some resources there. We need some design resources. We need some warehouse or factory resources. We need tools. We need people, artisans. And then what starts to happen is it goes through this conversion process and starts to become a product. This is just a quick view of a product we did for Marriott Hotel. They took about 60 chairs. Each chair was 6,000 Rand. So not a bad purchase order, but this is where it really comes into your thinking is I've got to take it from design. I've got to use my resources. I produce the product, and then I've got to sell it. And when I sell it, I get money back. And if we just go one slide back, the simple equation is that's what's left for me as profit. And to move forward, if you're in an entrepreneurial position, you need that profit to move forward. And that's what's key to understand. So there are a variety of different ways that you can add value as a designer. Some of them are incredibly obvious. Some of them, I think, take time as you go through your journey. Obviously, we want to make spaces more functional. We want to make them better. We want to make them emotionally driven. That works for different brands. Then there's the financial side, which we're going to get into, is how does design command more pricing? If you do something that is more premium for your customer, obviously then they can go out to their customer and charge more for that experience. And then there's strategic value as a designer. How can you support the business that you're a part of? And I think this is also quite a big lever that is underestimated and under-realized, obviously, generally when you're younger in your journey, is that the business that you join, or the studio that you join rather, is a business. And they've got these goals. And how do you join that business to help them grow? And in doing that, you grow and you align with their goals and you become a source of value yourself. And so an example obviously would be retail spaces. You can produce higher sales, or improve packaging design. You can boost sales. All of those things are true, and that's all a role of a designer, but a designer with the lens of how do I add value and where is the business side of what I'm doing. Let's just go to the next slide. So how to elevate your role. So a big thing is to understand the language of clients. And I often feel that people only relate this to commercial clients, whereas I've seen in my experience, this relates to independent private clients. If you're working on residential, people want to understand what are the costs, how do they go in. It's like one of my biggest things I spend time on is what is it going to cost? Is it going to come in on budget? Is it going to be valuable enough? Because remember, people move through spaces quite often in their lives, and they want to be in a position where whatever they invest now is going to add value later on, not just obviously the lifestyle value that they gain from it. So as a business client, you would say, how does what you do help them make money or solve a problem? Because if you can be in that position, they're like, let's do this thing. This is great. I love what you're doing. I understand it, and it's going to make me more money. And so adding value to clients along their journey is a really key mindset or mental model to try and get one's head around, because it takes you and your personal, I would say, ego out of the scenario and understand where you're going to meet the client and is it going to be the right client for you, because that is a big part of producing your brand independently, whether it be in an office or for yourself, is understanding where you fit in to your client's problem and if you're the right fit. And obviously, I'm sure you've learned this and from probably a lot of the other talks, part of your role as a guide, and you need to be in a position where you can guide your clients, educate them, and do that from a position of again, adding value. So there are a few things I would love to leave you with today, things that I think that are important to craft your business lens. I think it's incredibly important to go work for someone. I worked for a few practices before we started Dark Horse. We did start it very young. I was 27 years old and took on 60,000 Rand of credit card debt to do it, which we spent within the first 3 months because we didn't know what we were doing. So in reflection, I could have worked in different sort of capacities for longer, and I would urge people to do that. Understand the cost structure of the business that you're in, because you're a cost to the business, but what you're trading is value. So you want to be adding value, and the more value you add, the more you can charge that business. And so when you understand the cost structure and how they're operating, you can then see how you can solve more problems and be more valuable. Learn and understand your strengths. Not everybody is going to be a world-class designer. You might be an amazing project manager or an amazing client-facing person. Know where your strengths are so that you know where your weaknesses are, and you can either improve your weaknesses or double down on your strengths, and that'll drive your journey. Adding value is obviously critical. And then I would say once you're in that space and you have been for a while, maybe 2 years, then you can start testing ideas on the site. You might have an idea for product like we did. It might not even be furniture. It might be something else. You might have an idea of how you want to attract clients or do small projects in your free time. And now you kind of have a better sense of yourself. You have a better sense of the process, and you can test it and craft your offering. So you want to find a problem to solve. You want to understand the customer segment, so where you're going to operate. So for example, for us, we operate in, like I said, the high LSM. So we understand what the high LSM want more and more, obviously, as we go through it. We understand that they're very needy. They need lots of attention. They want communication all the time. Often they're willing to pay for things to be done faster, et cetera, but they're also looking for something that's more unique. They don't want to go to Choreographed or Valence, or we have clients quite often that are foreigners in the country, and their definition of quality is different. So that drives our business and our focus. Understanding the cost structure. So if we came back to that example of those chairs that we did for the hotel, if we didn't understand the cost structure of how to produce that, it's very easy that you can work very hard and get to the end and actually lose money, or get to the end and not make enough money. And so your cost structure is super critical to how you're going to solve these problems. So there's a problem, but can you do it for the price point that somebody's willing to pay? And lastly is, how do you create value? So if you walk away from today, I'd love you to ask that question for yourself and going forward. I think it's helped us, and it's super valuable. And I think that is short and sweet, but what I have for you today.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Jared. I just want to see if anyone in person here has any questions. I'm sure there must be. Yeah, we've got a couple. Just if you can speak nice and loud, that'll be great.
I'm a little bit confused. Do you design spaces and then sell the space to clients, or is that what Dark Horse does? Do you design a certain space and then sell that reality to a client? Because you were saying that you don't do what do you call it? Personalized work. You said that in the beginning while you were talking, you said you don't really go into personalized work, you sell products. So are your products the spaces that you've already made, or do you sometimes also design for clients specifically?
So if I jump back here, can you see these slides still?
Yes.
Okay, so all the furniture in these slides are our furniture. It's what we design and manufacture down in here in Cape Town. And so we either have a commercial client, for example, on the left, which is a property developer, and we'll go in because we've got the design skills. We did the interior on this particular project, and then we furnish it with our furniture. The bottom left, for example, we work a lot with interior designers, architects, and developers. They specify our product. So the product that we design with the view as a brand. It's a catalog product. So we don't work with interior designers or architects to develop new products unless there's enough scale. Because again, we're coming to that cost sensitivity. It's too expensive to do that. So we've designed it already. We've made it already. We've tested it already. And then we sell that product. So for example, if we take these chairs in the top left, we call those our OSO chairs. And those chairs are, 9,000 Rand a chair, but we've designed it, we've tested it, we can run it through production. We can do, 4 to 100 and we don't get too stressed. Does that help solve your answer?
So not all Oasis chairs look like that setting. There can be different settings for the Oasis chairs. That makes sense?
Can they do furniture? And you can buy their furniture as an interior designer, you spec their furniture.
I think there was a slight misunderstanding, but no, perfect, Jared. Other question, yes.
Yes. How did you scale Dark Horse from where it started to where it is today? Like, what steps did you take, and when did you realize that it's time to actually grow the business instead of just like remaining? Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a great question. So we started, like I said, we were still quite young. One of the positives of that is that you don't need much. So we kept our costs as low as possible. We hardly took anything in terms of a salary except to sort of survive. The first 3 years were incredibly difficult because obviously we didn't know what we know now, but we were designing essentially for us, which is, I hope you get from this, is a bit of a problem. It's not the right way to do it. And then trying to fit it into the market. And it took a while before we got 1 or 2 products which people obviously appreciated. But our big break took about 3 years. And we actually had a hotel in Joburg who used us to supply the entire hotel. It turned out to be about 3 shipping containers worth of product. And that was kind of like quite a big game changer. And at each stage, you learn more and you start to understand your process a bit better and how you scale. So I think that there's a truth to keeping it like tight and tidy in the beginning, and keep your costs low. Try and see where you can add that value, and then see if you can find more clients like that, and then you start doubling down and trying to grow that out. I hope that answers your question.
Another one.
Yes. Why product design, specifically furniture? Why that direction and not any other direction that you could have gone in?
Yeah, that's a great question. So There are a few answers to that. The one is I was in practice and I wasn't getting a lot of, and neither my wife, we were still dating at the time, but getting a lot of opportunity to design. So we wanted to design, and we also didn't get any opportunity to make stuff. So we enjoy making things. We wanted things to be tactile, understand the process, understand the technicality of it, how you actually make something to us is really important. And then we moved into an apartment in Cape Town, and it kind of was this interesting opportunity. Like we didn't feel like there was anything that we could buy that we liked, and then we sort of naturally progressed to trying to make stuff, and it kind of grew from there. So it was in some ways a bit of a natural sort of journey.
Thank you.
Great. And then we've got some questions online. One from Carl. What is the biggest lesson you'd give your 27-year-old self when you started out?
Sure. Okay, so I think that's a great question. I would say you've got more time than you realize, but act with intent. Act with intent with where you want to work. If you're fortunate enough to be in a position where your salary doesn't have to cover all of your expenses, be intentful about how you work. You've got a lot of time on your hands. Typically, you don't have a family yet, or whatever your setup is. So you've got a lot of time. When you get older, and if you choose to have a family, you have a lot less time. And then be very mindful and intentful on what you want to produce, and try and test it more and more and more, and as much as that you can. I think that those would be some key things I'd say to my earlier self, I think. Sounds about right.
Great. You had another question?
Yeah, I had another question. You mentioned knowing yourself as a creative. How do you navigate the challenges of finding your own identity in a space such as product design, where there's a lot going on? And how did you ground yourself in that identity, and then obviously becoming the partner of the course?
Sorry, I didn't hear that very well. Could you repeat it, please?
I'm just gonna move closer. You mentioned finding yourself, knowing yourself as a creative. How do you navigate those challenges of finding your own identity in a space such as product design, where there's a lot going on, obviously, and there's a bunch of other people who are releasing products which are vastly different from yours? How did you navigate those challenges, and how did you ground yourself in that identity, and obviously which then led, in that identity and becoming a partner of Dark Horse?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. So I think we probably more succinct. We wanted to create a brand, which I think if we go back 12 odd years ago is quite interesting, but also the youth was a little bit naive. But with that, we wanted to have what we thought the market needed, or where we thought there was a value or opportunity in the market. And it was validated. I think it took longer because you've got other forces in play, like marketing and price points and access to networks and things like that. I think if you looked at all of the furniture designers, let's say the sort of ones that have been around for a while, they all have their identity, right? There's always something that somebody's buying them for. People buy us for our aesthetic, obviously, and our quality, but we wouldn't come out with a pink chair. It's just not Dark Horse. It's not our identity, but it also doesn't resonate with us. And so we've kind of found our tribe of people, our market segment. And the thing with that, I think, is being consistent, right? So if you're going to work on anything and everything, then you've got to tell that story. Whereas if you're going to have a very particular view of design and your identity, what resonates and what you're willing to work until 3 a.m. on, then you stick to that, and you've got to try and find clients that you solve that problem for. So it kind of goes both ways, but people need to know what they're coming to you for. They need to know the problem that you're solving and the value that you're adding. And then I think it's quite critical to say no to stuff. So we went at a particular stage in the journey. What started happening was, as we grew, we had more capacity, and then we started realizing that we were making stuff that we didn't want to make anymore, because it was for clients who wanted stuff, and we could do it because we had the manufacturing capacity. And then we had to put a stop to that. But it took us quite a while to learn that, because we were kind of losing our identity. All of a sudden, we were just becoming a manufacturer and not really a design brand. And that didn't make us happy. So, yeah, I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
All right, then Michael Beckley has got a question. Jared, I don't know if you can see it in the chat.
I can. In high LSM residential projects, your design clearly adds lifestyle and aesthetic value. When it comes to developing and selling houses, how do you balance the increased design costs with actual value to the property? Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. I think the whole thing, right? If you're going to talk ROI and you're going to talk development, I mean, we do a little bit of that. Again, I think it comes down to the numbers will always dictate. So if you're going with a developer mindset and ROI, you've got your spreadsheets, you've got your calculations, you know where you need to be, right? Then you've got to say, who am I selling this property to? And then that's where you're adding the value, right? So you've got to know your customer and your target market. Typically what we do is that we then separate the furniture as a package. So we might shoot projects or put it into renders or whatever, and then we'll have a separate furniture pack where somebody can add to that. So it doesn't form part of the initial development flip price. What we found is that where we have done it before, where we've renovated and had furniture, and international clients, because of their travel or Airbnb component, they're very happy to pay the extra for the furniture and have it fully kitted out. But I think the big thing is, if you wanted to combine it, then what you would do is you would design the property to be a little bit more, you know, raw or natural if you want, reduce your finishes costs, see where you can sort of box smart there, and then put some feature pieces in. Very much our furniture becomes more like feature. And so we find that people buy things for specific areas generally, rather than having, you know, their whole house with our product. I hope that answers your question, Michael.
Yeah, and then we've got a question here in person. Just speak up when you ask.
I've heard many times that when you're expanding a business, there's a certain point where you have to employ people and delegate certain tasks, and that tends to be difficult. My question is, how did you navigate around? Since you guys like the designing aspect, and there was a point where you guys had to delegate tasks, how did you navigate through that difficulty?
That is the hardest part of it all. I'm not going to lie. It's a great question. I'm not 100% convinced that we've gotten it right. Hiring is super difficult. You hire the wrong people, they absolutely set you back and take your eye off the ball, and you go on, a real road trip. You hire the right people, and things start to feel like they gain incredible momentum and power. So I don't think I'm the best poster child for that, because I feel like I've got quite a few scars. But I would say try and hire slowly. The biggest asset for you will be systems. So I don't know if you've ever looked into that at all, but systems, business process management, if you were to go and read more about that, would be really valuable. Definitely something I wish I knew before I went to business school. The key thing there is that you want things in place that you can hold people accountable to and measure them against. And as creatives, we don't really often think that way. It's not kind of how we're wired, and we kind of get very excited about other stuff. And so it's very critical to have that, I would say, as much of that in place. Also put people on very short-term contracts that you can extend, or like a 3-month probation period. And you've got to then, if you're going to hire, you've got to be prepared to fire. And I think one of the bigger things I've learned over time is you've got to fire as fast as you can. Be on top of your admin, obviously, with all of the regulations, but understand that if they're not working out, they need to go and you need to move on.
Great. Then Sean van der Westhuizen has got a question online.
I see it. Is it at the, no, is it at the bottom? Oh, there. If you had to start your business again, what would you do? What would you not do and do? Sure. That's a super interesting one. Sean, business is often about cycles. So it's very difficult to answer that entirely with complete accuracy. When we started, the country was at a very different place. The economy was at a different place. If we go back in terms of GDP growth and those sorts of things. But if I had to go back, I think I would have approached retail sooner, because I think that would have given us a lot more leverage and changed sort of our trajectory a bit more. I think that would be my key takeaway right now. Yeah.
Brilliant. Anyone else with any questions? No questions in person. Let's just see anyone online.
It's a person.
Yeah, Mrs. Tapping. All right, so Mrs. got a question online.
Okay, so when we started, we identified the problem that there weren't many locally manufactured furniture providers. It was just the big sort of retailers. So we understood that as a problem. We understood that there was a gap in terms of the aesthetic. Everything was looking a particular way. There wasn't anything else. And so we identified that. And so then to do that, then we obviously started and we tested different products and we tested different aesthetics. And we kind of built these pillars around our business, and we stress test those. So we're very focused, obviously, on design and aesthetic, local manufacturing. We only locally manufacture and tell that story. And we were very focused on sustainability and telling that story. So we feel that those were three problems that at the time in 2011 weren't being addressed. And then naturally what happened is that the type of client that appreciated those things were higher LSM clients. And then we started solving more problems for those clients as we got the ball rolling. There was a very particular look and feel. There was a very particular way that they wanted communication done, et cetera, et cetera. And so we fleshed that out in terms of their needs. I hope that answers your question, Amisa.
So let's just see what everyone puts down on the questions. Great. Okay, Tabo's got a question. How do you market your business?
So we have a variety of channels. Obviously, if you dive deep into marketing, never a bad idea. You'll sort of get a sense of what it takes. But we've got a very strong and growing network of interior designers, architects, and developers. So we do a lot of communication one-on-one. We use marketing, email software, email automation, which we then send them out communication on a consistent basis, advise them in terms of what we're designing, where we're going, ask them actually for input. We then set up face-to-face meetings, so very personal from that perspective. We've then got e-commerce. So that runs as any e-commerce store would. Typically, those are retail or like private clients, B2C, and we market that through, all of the ad platforms. So your Instagram, Facebook, kind of stuff. So we run ads and we test those ads to see what engagement's like, what the uptake's like, et cetera, for different products, different times of the year, different seasons. We then did a retail partnership with At Home, where over 2 years we supplied them with product nationally. So that was super interesting for us to produce consistently at scale for national footprint. And obviously it was a really big purchase order. And then now and again, we'll do events where we bring people into our warehouse and factory space and show them around and kind of get like one-on-one. And then we've got our showroom there as well. So those are our key channels.
Great. And then Jamie Rees, what are some of the strategies for designers to identify their strengths and weaknesses to focus on adding the value?
So Jamie Rees, I think, my assumption is that you guys are all still studying. It's very difficult to know that for all of us. I think there's a little bit of personality. Are you typically extroverted, introverted? That might steer you in one way. When you look at what you like doing as part of your course, that'll steer you maybe in one way. But the big thing is try and get out there into the market, put yourself in positions, work for different practices, and then just see what resonates with you. When you're going through something, you might find, geez, I love being technical, or you might say, I really don't like getting that technical, or I really like the way site is run, and I really want to be on site all the time, like checking things are happening, et cetera. So I think that there's definitely a journey within that, and that just comes with trial and error. But I think it's just the awareness, right? You just want to try and be as honest and aware. There's no right or wrong. You're just trying to find out about yourself, about where you can fit in and where you can add that value. So I think the answer there would maybe just being open-minded and being honest with yourself as you walk through it, and not feeling like you have to be one thing or another necessarily, just to understand what makes you tick.
Great. Any book recommendations?
I've got a long list. I'll email you.
Hannah had a question.
Hannah's question. Sorry, I missed that completely. Hannah Hamilton has got a question. Is getting involved in importing and exporting a good idea? Met a guy a while ago, and when I told him I was studying interior design, he said, "Is it worth it?"
So there's two components to this, Hannah. You've got obviously product on the one side, so physical product, and then you've got services, which can also be imported and exported, as we all know. So from my personal experience, we tried to do that. I went to Germany about 5-6 years ago to try and set up a company. We warehoused our product over there in Hamburg. We tried to distribute it throughout Europe. We had some wins, we had some losses. I would say that if you want to do that, my big thing is look at the size of your product. So be very intentional about what kind of product. Our product at that time didn't work for a variety of reasons, but it's because it's really big, and big stuff is expensive to ship around. When it comes to importing, that's against our business ethos. We very much focused as much as possible on local production, because local production means that money goes down into the economy in a variety of different ways. We call it the trickle-down effect, and that boosts our economy. So importing is sort of a taker, not a giver. So that's on that side. In terms of services, it's highly lucrative. So if you're in a position where you can gain clients overseas, like we did some interior design for apartments in France, and everything is digital. I mean, obviously the downside is that you often don't get to go to site because that's not what you're mandated to do. But it does mean that you can charge increased fees because you're tied to a hard currency, like maybe a euro or a dollar or whatever. And then a lot of your time in that fee scale is all the meaty stuff. When you get to site, if you don't manage site properly, you lose a lot of money in that time frame. So it can be very lucrative. It just depends what you're looking to do in that space. I hope that answers you.
Great. And then last question, if you can just have a look at Angela's question, Jared.
Okay. Angela. Hi. What an amazing question. So what a bombshell to leave it on. So we have been copied throughout our lifespan of Dark Horse. People have ripped us off. I think the most hilarious one is that our chairs got ripped off for the Nelson Mandela presidential suite. And our family, my mother-in-law actually sent us a photo. It was like, oh, congrats, well done. I see your chairs are in Nelson Mandela suite. And we're like, no, that's a ripoff. Somebody knocked our chairs off. We went through this when we were sort of starting out. It's so expensive for furniture design. It's phenomenally expensive. And then you have to register it in every single region. So then when you compound that globally, it becomes really crazy. I think the positioning that we've taken is more like, if you're going to buy the original, it's not that much more. We're not talking like, like Minotti prices here. Then, those are the kind of clients that we want. We obviously get involved in a couple of strong-worded emails, and now and again we've sent legal letters. But it happens, and it sucks when it happens, but we haven't really found a way to stop it happening. And I don't think we will, because for every single design, and we've got over 50 products, we have to spend tens of thousands of rands per region, which makes it just very onerous. So yeah, I hope that answers your question a little bit.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jared. We are thrilled to have had you here. We look forward to potentially chatting to you again in the future. I think everyone enjoyed your talk. It was very insightful. And again, thank you for joining us in our talk.
Oh, thank you very much. I hope it did add some value, pun intended. And yeah, appreciate it, and good luck for the rest.
Great. Thanks. It was fantastic. Thank you. Yeah, actually, our next presenter, I think, is also logged in as well. Just for everyone online, we're going to take a 5 minutes body break, just to stretch a little bit. Francois, in the meantime, you can upload your presentation. And then we'll get started about 25 to. All right, I think this side we're ready to go. Everyone on the line, so you guys ready to resume? Wonderful. All right, so the next presenter up is Joshua Mercer. I have had the pleasure of working with him for quite a few years. Absolutely phenomenal designer, absolutely phenomenal critical thinker. And we're quite excited to welcome him here. Hi, Francois. Ready?
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me all right?
Perfect.
Okay, great. Thank you for the introduction, Ruben. I'm just that I can't see everyone, but and I don't have a very exciting background. I think it is a cat poster over there. So hang in there, everyone. Happy Thursday, everyone. Thank you. Yeah, I'm hoping my mind and my mouth can keep up together, keep in the same pace. This is my first time sort of going through a presentation like this in this kind of forum. Yeah, so thank you. Let me just see if I can, yeah, okay, great. Okay, so the presentation to me is sort of a very playful way of me in this sort of process of figuring out going on your own. I'm just going to find my notes here quickly. Okay, cool. So this project is a community social project, and the play on the T's and C's is sort of like, how do you go from a contract point of view, because my background. Yeah, so the title is called Rebuild Cape Town, which is based or connection with this sort of Bauhaus Earth in Germany that have sort of these projects or demonstrators around sort of focusing around timber, community and collaboration. But timber in this case is because of the material that we're using, but they want to focus on sustainable materials and how do you deviate or do architecture that's not focusing on heavy materials of concrete and, you know, sort of a lower impact and more sustainable. And yeah, so just a disclaimer, I am a professional architect with mostly commercial architecture experience. I worked at Paragon Architects for about 8 years, and then I was at ADIS in Dubai as a BIM consultant for about 2 years, just short of 2 years. And I wanted to shift gears after that sort of very intense environment. I did gain a lot of skills. So I wanted to do something a bit more meaningful. And so I started my engagement with like UCT, and I started conveying one of the courses there on behalf of one of my lecturers that taught me at UJ, Philippa Timbuini. And that sort of snowballed into having connections with Stewart and Partners, which they also have affiliated with UCT. They do a lot of quite a wide range of architecture, which is quite exciting. And the logo on the end is sort of my adventures in the future. So the definitions, over the last 11 years, I've sort of absorbed a lot of software, and I wanted to, yeah, I guess sort of translate that software into all those skills, right, in sort of a more community sort of base, because resources aren't, you can't put what you'd like the scale of a commercial architecture into these sort of very small things. And because I was one person, became quite a nice playing field for me to use all that software and apply it. I didn't use all of it, but yeah, we'll see. So the onboarding to this process, oh man, my text is overlapping, but anyway. Okay, so I started so when I left ADIS, I was at UCT. I am at UCT this year, and I've been conveying. And I reached out to Philippa again and asking, I want to do more sustainable architecture. And because of our current economy and our environment, it's those kind of projects are very hard to find, and also practices, because you still have to do work that bring in the money. So she, unfortunately, with timing and how the universe sort of aligns and sort of presents opportunities, is they have this project going on that is through the Bauhaus Earth, and it is affiliated with Student Partners and African Center for Cities, which it's a department within UCT that is sort of exercising these kind of projects. And I had a bit of free time with UCT, and she asked me to start on from a point of view of just drafting the project, because unfortunately the resources wasn't enough at the time. And as it started, I had a bit of panic, uncertainty, because I didn't know what the responsibility and risk was. Like I'm one person, and when you talk to Philippa or just architects with a lot of experience, they get really excited and they start snowballing these really great ideas. And I started to panic, like, am I able to do this? So I had to try, keep it simple, small steps, avoid overthinking. I had quite a few calls with her, and she would just had to calm me down. Probably people from Paragon know me that I do get a little bit unsettled. If things get a bit overwhelming. But I had to take deep breaths and just take small steps. As you'll see, the project isn't complicated, but I mean, these people are relying on you. So we define the responsibilities. So I could use my photography skills to photograph the process, and I would like to have made a video, but unfortunately that's out of my scope, and sound is very important when it comes to videos because you have to capture that. If you miss it, you can't go back. A photograph you can smudge, but a video, it requires a lot more equipment than what I have. So what I got involved with design and value engineering, which is the drafting, but I had to liaise and coordinate with XNAM, which was the contractor that is manufacturing these portals and these components for this project. And I had to send emails to the clients, stakeholders, updating them on progress. So now for a community project, I applied the commercial technique. So I set up weekly reports and captured the amount of effort I went to was quite extreme, I would say. And you have to now translate all this information that you've documented into a brochure, into exhibition panels. And it was quite exciting because now it's one human collaborating with all these, with the architects of Student Partners, ACC, Bauhaus Earth, and the various other places, stakeholders. So I'm going to take you through the brochure that was created for this project that gets into Bauhaus Earth to sort of monitor the progress, and it's almost preparing it to be published. So Rebuilt is the theme, or the research division in Bauhaus Earth. If you can check out their websites, you'll show that they've got 4 regional case studies, and one is Bhutan, Indonesia, Germany, and of course South Africa, Cape Town. So the map is sort of showing the relationships of all these different areas. So applying different contexts to trying to sort of engage with the locals, see how they can improve people's lives with these sort of interventions. They call them demonstrators. And so for our case in Cape Town, there is an interesting site in Langa. Its situation to the side, to Cape Town itself, is on the main arterial routes. I'm going to say the name's right. Or I want to say, in terms of the naming, I'm new to Cape Town within the last 2 years, so I know the routes inherently, but not in my mind anyway. So Langa is between sort of a lot of informality, a lot of social development projects are going up. It is raw, but at the same time, there's a lot of intervention, NGOs getting involved, so it gets quite exciting. And there's a lot of social entrepreneurs in these areas. So the site, Leratoli Avenue, it is this combination of a gallery with a urban farm that is renting from like the Red Cross. And the gallery sort of started the conversation, from what I understand, just sort of interlock these different uses. So the farm, because as you walk through into the courtyard, you sort of look onto the farm. So how do you improve that? And you'll see how we use the interventions to create a connection to all of them. So this farm, we got the gallery on the main road on Laratoli Avenue, and then that sort of, the farm is set back. Let me see, clear those. And within this sort of all the stakeholders, we've introduced 4 interventions, and the uses are the gallery. These portals had to adapt to sort of become a podium, allow for sort of events that do take place at the courtyard. And then within the gallery, let me see if I can use within the farm, there's a tea garden. We'll unpack a little bit later. It's run by MZ, who's sort of growing local produce and formulating sort of African teas, and sort of encouraging sort of tourism. So with the gallery, a lot of tourists will come and spend time in the gallery, and then now they're trying to extend it on that you can also go for a tea experience. You can also probably buy produce from the farm. So all these moments are trying to activate various things. So there's a work area where they do prep the produce, clean it up to sell. They don't have a market, so we're trying to introduce one on the top left. And yeah, let's see here. So the material palettes, we had to work within sustainable, and we chose sort of laminated timber as one of the drivers, the main driving portal. And through design development, we wanted to use gabions to be sort of these holding anchors because of the intense winds within the Cape. But they also became opportunities to sit on. Maybe even most suggestions from the community was using those gabions as well as planter boxes. And through this whole process of developing the drawings, we were having meetings with the community and on site, showing them the drawings. But what was quite interesting is the drawings for an architect is we can read it, but drawings aren't necessarily universal communication tools. So we evolved in that the 3D model became really useful. So we actually generated VRs through Twinmotion. Yeah. So here is the 4 elements and how they're meant to connect. We're starting with the gallery, and you've got the farm itself. It is sort of being run by the UNveils Hub, which is also affiliated to the SAFET, which is the South African Agriculture, Food, Urban Transformation NGO. There are a lot of players that are trying to help sort of connect all the dots. So this here together is the 4 parts of the project. So we've got the gallery, 16 on Laratoli Gallery, and we've got Tea with the Farmer, MZ, and then we've got SAFET, South African Urban Food Farming Trust, and then we've got the Langa Agri Hub, which is actually the farmers. So the farm, they rent out the plots to various farmers that they can rent, grow produce, and sell. So understanding all these 3 or 4 players and trying to embody or empower all of them, that they can capitalize on creating an economy within there. Yeah. So the project has basically 2 types. It has entertaining type and a performance type. Entertainment was, it didn't have to have sort of solid roof structure. It was pergolas, just to sort of create up light, just for place for people to sort of relax and sit. It was a transition. But where people are working, it had to perform in a particular way. So we did introduce some shade netting, just to reduce the heat load of people sitting in certain areas, and also helped with growing. You'll see in the tea garden. So the elements is you've got these portals. which we've named them. And those are these large X-lambs. They're about 4 meters tall. We did go through a process of trying to shorten it because when you see this object in real life, it's quite substantial, like beautiful gesture. And was trying to make it suit the context. We had to adjust the size. So if you're not too sure how everyone's viewing this, but you are welcome to scan the QR code on the next one, and you can actually access the VR. I will enlarge it on the next one. But this is the gallery courtyard. There is an existing sort of art piece in the middle, and I did use the iPad's Polycam to sort of create a point cloud and upload it and link it into Twinmotion, which was quite nice to add a bit of character because rendering models get quite, they have no personality because you have to spend a lot of effort modeling it. But the point cloud sort of added that layer of realness to it, which I liked. You can scan it. Let me know. I'll probably just give a few minutes. Let me fix my hair as well. It's gone a bit wild. And there is QR codes for each area that we can go through. So you can go through to the tea garden. I think even in that one link, you can actually navigate all the different spaces, depending on how familiar you are with that kind of interface. So with the drawings that were generated, it was all modeled within Revit. And I didn't use, I was going to initially use Rhino, but because I had to issue drafting layouts to XLAM so that they can use it to coordinate, Revit was the best to document that. But I think I did occasionally would export the model to Rhino if I wanted to export graphics. I used PDF vectors and then brought this all into Illustrator to create all of this. I haven't actually done these kind of drawings in a very long time because commercially you have to just produce very quickly. And this was a very nice breath of fresh air that I could actually spend the time and create these little personalities, like personal touches with the scale elements and the grass sort of scale elements. Yeah. So the tea garden is for MZ, where it's sort of, he has all these planter boxes and we had to create the space where he can sort of formulate, give him free rein to what he needs to do. Because the soil isn't that great. It is sand, beach sand. So they would have, some of them have rehabilitated the soil. It had taken some time through composting, but also with the wind, as in summer, that top layer gets blown away. And so planter boxes have been the for MZ's approach to grow his produce. Yeah, so if we go to the next one, you can scan the QR code again. So I did do a combination because the VR renders were very useful to unlock the drawings. The drawings, as we were showing them, the community people that had a bit more experience with reading drawings to try to speak to them and translate them what's actually happening. But the moment these VR, I brought that to site and I showed them, it was a switch that went off that they were like, yes, they actually now can see what this is going to look like. As you can see with your phone, you can go to site and actually navigate, and you actually can stand in that point and show them what the intent is and what will happen. And they got a lot more excited. Yeah, it just sort of unlocked the next layer. So again, so this is tea garden's layouts. This has got the shade netting. We did try to play with sort of undulation, stepping some of the purlins, acting as bracing to create some interest, that it wasn't just some simple straight wrap. I did do a bit more playful maze with the planter boxes, but that's not within our scope. But yeah, just showed the opportunity, and yeah, worked with a 1.2 grid so that everything sort of continues. For the work utility area, there is this existing deck with a little pavilion that has all their services in them, so water, electricity. But I think there's solar, yeah, it's where that's like the heart of where they get all their things they need to clean and prep everything up. But before it was just on this flat deck, and in summer you just get hit with a lot of sun. So this was just basically a shading introduction, and also to gather and have meetings, because that's what we were doing. We were sitting in this area over this table and having discussions. Yeah, you can probably scan the code if you like. It will take you to that view, but you can use the same link to navigate. Yeah, as you can see, it's quite simple. We did have to insert, so I have indicated where sort of the portions have to be removed. The last portion was the most expensive one. It had a combination of these sort of lats in the back that could be used as hanging opportunities. So if we do set up a market, they could probably create, yeah, sort of that you're not just selling on the vertical or horizontal, you can go vertical. And I mean, also the pergola itself could also be another opportunity. We're really excited to see what will happen as over time. They are built photographs. Next. Yeah, here's the code. Sorry if I'm rushing through it. We don't have, unfortunately, funding for this one. So this one is on hold, but it is in there, in that sort of place. But I think also the land needs to be secured because it's sort of sitting out of the boundary. So there is that sort of process that we need to consider. So what I did also with the weekly reports is I translated into this timeline of how the project has been documented and has gone through the phases. So we started in 29th of March, and that was through a lot of community engagements of pinning up the drawings and sort of capturing how this site has changed over time, because we had an incidence of quite a lot of rain. So within these images, you can see there's on the bottom left, the work area structure that is sort of collection of all these different materials, and that sort of gives you quite a nice cue. We were going to use what they call Rika blocks. So to avoid going through a council approval is to try and minimize your footprint. So these are basically temporary structures so that you'll see later they actually can be removed. So they don't require any approval because they're sort of follies that are in the landscape. And that was quite an interesting process. So, and quite exciting, because if forever in the future they do find a new plot of land, these structures can be uprooted and moved and relocated, which is quite exciting. Because one of the details, we were going to use gum poles, but with a lot of the rain, we had to switch gears, and XLAM decided or proposed we use ground screws, but unfortunately they couldn't source local ground screws, so they had to manufacture their own. So this next slide is showing that when we were coordinating on site, that when we had the heavy rains, that water table was so high and we were worried about the sort of structures being pushed out. So they developed these ground screws, very crude. Yeah, at the top right here is where we sort of went through the sample approval, checking the heights. We did adjust them. I think we lowered it by 750 because we were worried it was going to be much taller than the low-lying structures around there. But we didn't want to be invasive. We wanted to complement the space. I really did enjoy going to the site because there's like very interesting techniques using probably some of you have experienced it, where they use a clear tube and they fill it up with water and they wait for it to level out, and they can measure all the pins and make sure they're all at the exact same height once they've established the one, and just by using the clear tube and the water levels. that was the first time I came across that, and I found that really exciting and innovative. So the materials were delivered to sites, and quickly they started to assemble this portals. And they were just Lego blocks that just came and clipped in. Have just been delays when you run out of screws or yeah. So yeah, it is quite beautiful when it's starting to come together. Sort of the next phase is putting up the roof structure and gabions and the decking. That portion A and B will be done for, sorry, it says I got connection lost. Is everything okay? Can you hear me? Okay, cool. Yeah, so we're aiming for the 6th of October because we have a meeting with some of the people from ACC and UCT. And the big sort of opening one is the 26th of October, where Lunga has an open street event where they're sort of going to close down that area and have parties and events. So it's going to be quite exciting. Let me just jump quickly to as built, well, what's larger view of what's happening on site. And yeah, with some of that coordination, there's just moments that just absolutely beautifully line up. And yeah, quite proud. They've done an incredible job. Also through this process, we have an engineer approving all the ground screws, the bracing in part of the weekly progress. We did have a coordination on how to tell the engineer to make a sort of a more aesthetically pleasing approach on how you do the bracing. Yeah. That's it. Thank you so much. Any questions?
Great, thank you. Do we have any questions from anyone in person here? Right, so I mean, I've got a question, Francois. Just on your conceptual process on projects like this, there's obviously a different approach to your project brief, with some of the requirements being less focused on the product-based design approach that some, especially commercial projects, demand for. Get specific chairs for this, get specific desks for that, and layouts on office space like this. With projects like these, what is your conceptual approach, if I can put it like that?
Well, fortunately, I didn't have to figure out what the design intent was. There already was, because I picked up from someone else that already started the drawing process, which is nice because I don't have to speak to Philippa and unlock and try and figure out what is her vision, because the vision has already been sort of in place, and I can sort of just take it and snowball with it, especially within commercial experience with working at Paragon and ADIS was the big idea was already there, and you had to understand what it is and you have to start to evolve it and take it further. Because often the time, if I start the conceptual process, it's not what everyone else wants because it's completely gone the other direction. But it's a skill to take the brief and not run away with your own agenda. So it was quite humbling just to keep it simple and definitely disagree when something wasn't looking right. But I think that answered your question.
Yeah. Then we've got a question from Ian in the chat. I don't know if you want to directly read that.
Curious regarding the rhythmic patterns or the layouts of the pergolas and why they're designed like that, or did I miss the explanation? So the approach was to find like a kit of parts. So we designed one element and how you repeated it. The grid spacing between the portals, they were mostly driven by the timber spans because the decking had a grid structure of 1.2, and so we try to work within that sort of spacing. So it was understanding that there was this layering of a finer grain, and it was trying to minimize wastage when you start to cut out any of the pieces. And then that sort of just continued on. The tea garden actually used to be a lot further inside in the garden. Let me see if I can refer to the layout. So yeah, it was really about just keeping it really simple, because this typology is going to be probably applied elsewhere in Langa. There is a smiley market that has run down, and this approach with the ground screws and this very simple portal, and that's just sort of clipped together. It's easy, I would say simpler to manufacture through XLAM, and it's just chopping it and configuring it, placing it together. Any other questions? Well, I go back to the master plan.
Anyone else with any other questions? No, it seems everyone is happy, everyone understands. Franco, thank you so much for presenting for us. I think it was quite insightful and valuable. We appreciate you having joined our talks. I see Egan is expanding on his question.
In the resting area. Roof covering in the resting area. So it was actually, we orientated in this direction, but we had to introduce more portals, and actually because of the sun is north is completely up, so you're going from east to west. The shading was positioned in that sort of direction, so that majority, especially your afternoon sunlight, is the worst, sort of beating in also into your eyes. So its position was to try to accommodate position of the sun. The tea garden was interesting, and had to change direction as MZ expressed that he didn't want the predominantly of his morning afternoon. He wanted to capitalize on that sort of light onto his produce. He didn't want it to be covered continuously the whole day. So there were the positioning had to change depending on the use. I hope that's answered the question. Cool.
Sure. All right, great. Thank you so much, Franco. Very interesting. We appreciate you joining our talks. Again, look forward to having to join us.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. Hopefully next time in person, you can see my mannerisms. And I can see your guys' faces, live reactions as well. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thanks, same to you. All right, so we're gonna hand over to our next speaker, our last one for the day, Mr. Meeple. He just needs a minute or so just to come and set up here in person, and then we'll carry on. Thanks, everyone. All right, everyone. I think we are ready to go. I just want to confirm if everyone online can hear us fine. Great. All right, so just to introduce our next presenter, his name is Nhlakanipo Mashinini. He is one of our own. He is one of our architectural lecturers, architect, designer, and also filmmaker. We are thoroughly excited to welcome you to our talks as well, and thank you so much for joining us. And I'm going to hand over to you. I think we are good. Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks, Ruben. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I know I'm the last person to speak today, so hopefully I don't bore you too much. Hopefully my talk is exciting. But for those of you who don't know me, my name is Nhlakanipo Mashinini, and I am a film director, an architect, an educator. And I'm going to be giving you guys a talk today titled Framing the Allegory. And hopefully this talk will pose more questions than lecturing you guys. But these are questions that I have also asked myself in the work that I do. And these are going to be questions that sort of look at how film and architecture can begin working together and begin sort of taking from each other and learning from each other to begin creating very interesting work. So hopefully, again, the work that I do get to show you inspires you, gets you thinking differently about architecture, and hopefully also just gets you to see how I think architecture can be. Okay, so does everyone know who this person is? Yes. Okay, so some of you are familiar with this person. So, guy's name on the image is not me. I know he looks like his name is Virgil Abloh, and he's one of my biggest inspirations. He is trained as an architect, but he's quite well known for his fashion design work that he does. So he has a famous quote that goes, "Architects can change the world by not building buildings," which is quite a crazy statement to say as an architect, right? But for me, I think, Virgil was able to take methodologies and ideologies of architecture and translate those things into fashion, right? So he was one of the first Black lead creatives at the luxury fashion house Louis Vuitton, which is quite a big thing, quite a big deal, He also sort of started a very important and famous street luxury brand called Off-White, which for me was a brand that spoke about how one should be authentically themselves, which is something I always push my students to do, but also I push in my own work, is that, who you are is the voice that you need to bring into your work, no matter what. Right? So there's always this thing of us trying to be this specific architect because we sort of grew up knowing what architect should be like, right? But that changes over time. So it's important to be authentically yourself. And I think that's why Virgil Abloh has inspired me so much. It's pushed me to be authentically myself and sort of do what I want to do in this world, in this field of architecture. So as I've mentioned, I'm an architect, award-winning filmmaker, and educator. And in between these three pillars of mediums, I'm also a graphic designer, creative director, and artist. And, I always sort of look at how I can begin throwing all of these mediums into a melting pot and see what work I can begin creating, right? So how do I start using filmmaking to create interesting architecture? Or how do I start using graphic design to start making interesting films, right? I may not always get it right. I may not know how to do it, but the question is what is the important part, right? I also try to use my students' studio as a place of experimenting. So most of you guys know I'm always pushing you guys to think differently about things, thinking differently about how you can draw or create architecture. And my students are always, giving me amazing feedback and providing me with amazing work that sort of tells me that this is possible. Mixing these mediums is possible and can make for very interesting work. So that's sort of what I do. So I'm gonna play a little short video for you guys. Let me know if you can hear the sound.
Nobody comes back late at night anymore. They have more security.
The government noticed that they were moving into new areas. That's when things started to get out of hand.
Okay, so you guys recognize any of those movies? Okay, which ones do you guys recognize? Chappie, Tsotsi, which other one? District 9, okay. Okay, so there are a lot of movies in this little clip, and there are a lot of characters in this video, right? But what is important to note also is that there are different pieces of architecture, different spaces, right? And these spaces define who the characters are, but also stand as metaphors of their context and of sort of who these characters are, per se, right? So I'll just give this example of, architecture and people are a very tightly knitted bond, right? So if you move into your house is one thing, right? Separate sort of character. And you are your own sort of separate entity as well. But when you move into the house, something interesting begins happening, right? The house changes. You either begin to paint the walls, you decorate it, you begin damaging it or improving it in whatever way. So that's you having an effect on the space, right? But also the house has an effect on you. Either if it's a horrible house, you can become a very depressed person. If it's a beautiful space to be in, then you can become a very happy person, right? So there's always this tightly knitted bond between space and people. So I think whenever we talk about narratives, whenever we talk about stories, it's not just about us as people, but it's also the spaces that we find ourselves in, right? And those are also characters in your story. So something to note. So when we dissect those little movies that were in that clip, so most of you saw the movie Tsotsi, and I'd like to sort of speak of the shack as a metaphor for the protagonist in the movie, right? So if you don't know Tsotsi, Tsotsi is, about this guy who is a victim of his circumstance, and he sort of chooses this life of crime, and something bad in the movie ends up happening where he hijacks someone, and in that hijacking he steals a baby, right? So the shack for me represents this idea of isolation, represents this idea of entrapment, and this piece of architecture defines who the protagonist is, right? It's someone who feels entrapped or trapped by his environment, right? It's someone who feels that they cannot get out of their own sort of circumstance, and they have to choose a life of crime to sort of break free of this entrapment. If we look at District 9, this idea of the alien ghetto, these sort of two cities that are in tension, right? Or these sort of two cities that represent segregation and separation, right? If you know what District 9 is about, it's about this whole play on how South Africans feel about foreigners. So this idea of them versus us is again a metaphor for how we experience space and how the space defines how people feel about each other, right? And then I don't know if you guys know the movie Vaya. Okay, not so much. Okay, but again, this idea of a city of tension. For me, I think this talk finds me at a time where I'm very interested in the city and its complexities and its various scales of tension, right? So there are a lot of different cultures, people within the city, and they all sort of try to navigate how they use the city. They try to navigate who their identity is within the city. And these things begin to clash, right? These things begin to sort of work against or with each other, right? So this is a representation of a city of tension. And then Chappie for me also represents this idea of nostalgic decay. So this idea that architecture changes and fades over time, but so do people, right? People think differently over time. People end up changing over time. Right? So again, there's that correlation between the two. Okay, so this is the part of the presentation where I start posing questions, right? And hopefully these are questions that can get your creative juices flowing. So when I look at architecture and film, there are things that we called, or that I like to define as a shared language, right? So things that film does, that architecture also does in an interesting way. And one of those things that in architecture, we've got drawings, right? We've got plans and sections, elevations, right? Those are almost like sets of instructions of how to build your building, right? But in film, we've got shot lists, we've got storyboards, and those tell us also how to build this world or how to make the movie. But I think both of these tools also tell us how to move through space, right? So a plan shows us the spaces in relation to each other and all the passages and how we move through those spaces. But also shot list tells us how we move the camera in each set that we have for each scene. So my question would be, what would happen if we started creating a shot list for a piece of architecture? What would that be? What would that look like, right? So how would we define how the audience moves through our space? What is our camera movement? Or if we had to start thinking about what is our lens choice in our piece of architecture, how far do we want our audience to see whatever particular thing we want them to see in our piece of architecture, right? What would be the aspect ratio of our framing for our piece of architecture, you know? So all of these things can begin getting you to think differently about how you make architecture, right? So maybe if you're thinking about, for example, there's something specific you want to frame in your piece of architecture, how do you start thinking about how long you want to hold that frame? And what does that mean for your concept? What does that mean for your story? Questions. I don't have the answers, but questions. So I also like to also think of literature as a thing that you can use to compare film and architecture. So for example, script writing is another method of instruction. So a script tells you how to tell the story, right? And if we go back and dissect the script and compare that to a film, right? So in a script, we've got a word. We all know what words are, obviously, right? But in film, we've got a shot, which is a still image. A number of words gives you a sentence, right? And a number of still images stitched together gives you a moving image, okay? A number of sentences gives you a paragraph. And a number of moving images gives you a scene, okay? And a number of scenes then obviously gives you a movie, and a number of paragraphs gives you a story, right? So if we took that understanding into architecture, what would be the word? What would be that basic sort of most minimal unit of measure in architecture? What would be the element, right? So could we maybe say in our piece of architecture, a door handle is the word, right? And maybe the door is the sentence. And maybe the space is the paragraph. And the number of spaces becomes then the story or the architecture. So if you start thinking of it like that, does that then force you to start designing your architecture to the most minimal, smallest scale, right? Which then makes for interesting architecture. Because you're not just designing something from the outside in, but you're designing from inside out, the smallest thing in your architecture moving out. So, interesting way of approaching how to make architecture. So, architecture and film have outputs, right? So in architecture, you make a piece of architecture. In a film, you make a movie, right? And these outputs are both methods of archiving histories, archiving traumas, archiving ideas, so on and so forth, right? But for me, I've always found that in architecture, architecture has a very limited way of archiving stories, right? So if you look at the example on the left, the Pretoria Art Museum, for me, that gives us a snapshot maybe of the style of architecture and the period that piece of architecture was designed in, which was around the apartheid time. But we don't really get to know, who the people were that designed this building, or who were the people that encompassed or inhabited this building. What were their ideologies? What are their perspectives? What are their, things that they believed in, right? You don't get to see that in that building. But if you look at another piece of output, which was made around the same time, which is a film called Mapanzula, you get a lot more about that time period, about the people, about the architecture, and how those things were always sort of playing against each other, right? So how do we then start translating these two things or cross-pollinating these two things? So how do we start creating buildings that archive in a better way? How do we start creating buildings that are able to archive the people that inhabit them, archive the way they think, what they believe in? How do we do that? I don't know. Questions that you guys will figure out in your careers as architects, right? So, yeah, I think for me that's a part that becomes very interesting. Because if we can start really thinking about our buildings as pieces of archives and be very diligent and careful about how we archive those stories, right? Because they're going to live on and surpass us as people. Okay, so one of my favorite film directors, Guillermo del Toro, is a Mexican film director. And, for me, I'm quite interested in marginalized voices, people who don't always get the platform to tell their stories and perspectives. And Guillermo del Toro is one of those people who have interested me because, you know, he's able to create very interesting worlds, very magical and majestic worlds, and make them believable, right? So one of my favorite movies from him is called The Shape of Water, and it follows this lady who falls in love with this half man, half fish creature, right? Which sounds crazy when I even say it, but when you watch the movie, you actually believe it. You know, I don't want to say you fall in love with the fish, but you know, you understand why she's falling in love with this person, and you buy into the world, right? And one of the devices Guillermo uses very well to make those worlds believable is his use of light and color, right? So in this movie, it has this greenish turquoise overlay that is consistent throughout the whole film, which is a very hard thing to do, right? Because how do you make a early Sunday morning that you know in your head to be orangey, yellowish, green? You know, how does that work? You know, the sun is not green, but how do you make that all believable? So he found a very interesting way to do it, and the movie is, you know, one of the best movies I've ever seen. So, learning from Guillermo del Toro, there are other architects who also are able to use and manipulate light very well and use them in creating very experiential architecture. So the students will know I'm always pushing you guys to use light and shadow in your designs, because it's quite important, right? You want us to believe in the thing that you're designing, right? You want us to buy what you're selling. So light is one of those things. And I think today Ando is one of those architects who's able to really use light to create beautiful architecture, framing walls, framing spaces, directing how audiences should look and experience his architecture. And I think that's something we should all employ into our architecture. Okay, so now that I've spoken about those stuff, right, some of those shared languages and how we can begin, framing emotions and using light and color in our architecture, have I used those things in my own work? Have I successfully been able to take what I've learned from architecture, so all of these methodologies and ideologies, have I been able to bring those things into my filmmaking? So one of my first short films that I shot and made is titled Nzimbi. And again, it's a short film that starts off with a question. And the question is, can I create a movie entirely shot from the perspective of a car? How do I engage audiences? How do I frame my characters? And how do I show the context of where the story takes place entirely from the perspective of the car? Now, I do want to add, it did work, it also didn't work, but it's part of the process, right? It was my first short film. So I'll play a little trailer of it.
Just change your audio
to TV. Sure. Where? Here?
Yeah.
And then here. Sorry, 1 second. Good.
Yini into says is it the size of our name or mile? Respect. How?
Ntwana wabona yide utshwere kanti ka matlhio ntle le zabelungu straight.
Anje kasi ke. onokwazi ukuphila.
Last time ngasithola kitchen angatsho kanawari
Fortunately, system is
isibhamu sizosdubula sizokhala njengama-cricket Cheese boys, hamba sazokala mfethu arivayile yini lamasinga
siphila.
Okay, so if you do want to watch this film, it's available on Amazon Prime. You can see it there, and see if, you know, some of these questions that I've asked were successful or not. My second short film, titled Cogito Ergo Sum, I Think Therefore I Am, is a SAFTA award-winning short film. If you guys know what the SAFTAs are, South African Film and Television Awards. It won the best short film in the year 2023. And I think for me, again, this film started off as a question. Can I create a short film entirely based in one setting, right? In one sort of piece of architecture? How do I hold the story in that place? How do I make sure you feel for the characters and you understand their background, you understand what traumas they carry? And I think what I used a lot in this film is the use of light and color, like Tadeo Ando, like Guillermo del Toro. You'll see in the film, there's a lot of use of color, right? A lot of green and yellow sort of overlays, which for me helped with the film in terms of giving audiences another sort of level of understanding what the characters were thinking about and going through. So for example, whenever there's a green color in the movie, you are either hearing something that is very analytical from the psychologist, or if there's a red overlay, you are hearing something very emotive from the psychologist. So this story basically is about a guy who is having nightmares and dreams about murdering his friend. And, you know, he feels like these dreams are very vivid, but he's not sure if, you know, they're actually just dreams or they are sort of replays of something that he's committed. So he checks himself into a psychologist, and the psychologist sort of tries to help him sort that out and sort of see if it actually did happen. So the movie is on YouTube if you want to watch it. So please do watch it, and I'll play a short little clip of the movie.
I'm going to ask you the famed question. What brings you into David? You suffering from insomnia?
Not exactly. So actually I've been avoiding sleep because my dreams, nightmares, they're getting worse.
Okay. What dreams are these?
Cool. So again, in my film work, all of the stuff I speak about, framing, color, light, shadow, is in there, right? And I think for me, it's made me a better filmmaker. You know, all these things that I've sort of learned from architecture has forced me to look at filmmaking differently. You know, and I wonder if filmmaking has made me a better architect. You know, maybe it has. I'm still trying to figure out that answer. So my latest short film titled Dream Call is one of my more interesting works, One, because it's the first time where I actually really show architecture in my filmmaking. And Dreamcore follows these two Ghanaian brothers that immigrate to South Africa, where the one brother is sort of accompanying his older brother on his journey of becoming an architect. And they go through the city and, they suffer, a lot of hatred from, the people in the city who, don't really feel for foreigners. And, it's quite a touching story. It's quite a complex story in the sense where, you see how these foreigners are being treated, but we also try to show how, South Africans aren't bad people, So we do show how they assist and show love to these two Ghanaian brothers. I think what I also wanted to do with this film is that a lot of the times we have this perspective about the city, right? That it's this dirty place, it's a place that we don't really want to visit because it doesn't, interest us. We also, sometimes feel like the city doesn't have any interesting architecture because it doesn't have any Zaha Hadid-esque buildings, right? But, through the conversations I had with my director of photography, he just told me that if you're able to change your perspective by 45 degrees, it unlocks a whole new world, right? And that's exactly what it did for me, is that just by changing my perspective by 45 degrees, just looking up by 45 degrees or looking down by 45 degrees, I got to experience the city in a whole new way. And I found that there's very beautiful and interesting pieces of architecture in the city. So, I try to contrast all of those traumas and all of those tough parts of the movie with these beautiful images of the architecture in Johannesburg CBD. So the movie's not out yet. Hopefully you guys will get to see it soon next year. But that's basically what the film explores in terms of, story, space, and architecture. And then lastly, just look at my sort of architecture work, where I've tried to bring in some of these not far-fetched ideologies, but try to be as experimental as I possibly can with what I've been given. First of all, this project I did at the Lesotho Nature Hotel. Again, here for me, I was trying to explore the idea of framing, especially framing these landscapes and views from the cliff of our site. Again, not as, if I look back at the work, not as experimental as I would like to be, or would have liked to be. But again, these are some of the things that you come across as architects, right? You've got clients who want to pay for something specific, and you as an architect want to inject your own philosophies and your own ideologies into the work, and there's always going to be that clash, right? And then lastly, again, I did a little proposal project for the Mpumalanga Skills Hub. Again, I was trying to play with light, trying to play with the idea of framing spaces, framing views, just to see how I can sort of bring in those filmmaking techniques into the architecture that I make. So I think these projects are, for me, testament to how the modern day architect needs to find alternative ways of practicing architecture, because you're not going to always get the dream project that you want. You may not always get the job or the opportunity to actually design a building. So what does that mean for you as an architect? Does that mean you stop practicing architecture? No, right? It means you need to find some form of output, some other way to continue to scratch that itch of being a designer. So hopefully that was insightful. Hopefully that inspired you. Hopefully that got to show you guys how I think. And I'd just like to leave you with one thing before I end. I think in whatever project, in whatever work you do, make sure that people either hate it or people love it, right? If people are ever indifferent about the work that you do, then you're not really pushing the boundary as much. Okay, so thank you for your time.
We've got 2 questions. Are there any questions from anyone in here?
So, you know I love your work. I think we come from the same plot, so I know how you think. But I need to ask you the question as to what makes you angry. Because I think that because I love your work, I overlook certain things, but I need to know what makes you angry so that the next step has all that passion to do better.
Yeah. I think I'll start off by saying like not being heard is what makes me angry. You know, I think I've got a voice, I've got opinions, I've got things to say, but I'm not always given the opportunity to say those things, you know? So that's why in every thing I do, whether it's a logo, or it's a painting, it's a movie, I always want some sort of reaction, because for me that reaction starts the conversation, right? And the conversation is where you can then hear my perspective, right? So yeah, like that's one of my biggest fears is never being heard, you know? And that's why I always try to make as much work as possible and put it out there, you know, so that people can begin engaging with the work. So yeah, hope that answers the question. Yeah.
About 3 questions.
Okay.
First of all, how do you go about framing space? Because the previous part was showed you were framing the landscape. How do you then frame a space? You can answer that. Okay. There is something like yeah.
How do I begin framing a space? I think I always start off from the narrative, I think, right? So I always speak of my interest in narrative and space or event and space. So whatever narrative or story that needs to take place in that space is where I start by, you know, designing the space. So if it is a piece of protest architecture, then I'll start off, you know, about making a space that is proactive or that is, you know, protest-like in some way, or whatever sort of story that needs to take place in that space is where I then start off by designing the space. You know? Yeah, that's my beginning point, and then I work on from there.
I might have a 4th question. Okay, cool. Before I move to the other questions, then how do you then, so with framing a space, you're framing from narrative.
Yeah.
How do you then relate the nature of the space that you're now framing this narrative to the nature of the landscape or the outside, so that these two very different inside and outside work together?
It's not always a one-way process where, you know, it's space and then the context or context in the space. But for me, I always, again, start off with the narrative and design from inside out, right? And then always then having the conversation with how this one specific thing relates to the broader story, right? Whether it's the context, whether it's the site, whether it's the people around the context, whatever that broader story is I'm always trying to relate that minute sort of detail to the broader context. And it's always a constant conversation because, you know, sometimes working from the outside in doesn't really help you sort of sort out the interior spaces, but sometimes also working from the inside out doesn't sort of help you with the architecture related to the context. So it's a constant conversation.
And then the last two questions would be, what is then your, so it's okay for now, answer, but what's your life's mission as an architect, filmmaker, and what legacy do you then want to leave behind for people down the line?
I'm still trying to figure that out, right? But I think, and I don't know if this answers your question, but I'm just reacting to your question. So I always joke about with my friends that I may be the first architect to have a SAFTA award, and I may be the first, I may be the first architect to have SAFTA award, but I may be also one of the first architect filmmakers who are quite successful in the country, right? So I think my one thing is that I want to really, when it comes to the filmmaking stuff, I really want to put, South African stories on the map internationally. And I think when it comes to the architectural stuff, I want to show that, it's possible to become this new age architect, right? It's possible to be more than just someone who makes buildings. It's still call yourself an architect, right? Because a lot of the times you may say you're an architect, filmmaker, or architect this, and then sometimes people then say, okay, you're not really an architect, because an architect has to do one thing. So I think I just want to be able to inspire and show you that it's possible to do whatever you want to do. You make up the rules. Yeah, cool. Thank you. Cool. Thank you. Thank you for the question. Yeah.
So we're talking about lives and how to communicate with a lot. I've been trying to experiment with what are the ways of what are the ways you communicate through lives, more specific, with building more specific, since you learned some of that from film?
Yeah. I think for me, light, you can use light in a number of ways, right? And how I've tried to use light in the buildings I've made is to get to make you feel something in the space, right? So, if you're very subtle and soft about the light that you bring into the space, you can begin creating very calm and relaxing spaces, right? If you're not using light at all, then how does one experience the space? How does one see things, right? Maybe I should ask you this question: if you're never able to see things, so if you're in a dark space, would things actually exist, right? So how would you know if something is there or not if there wasn't any light, right? So light is always about framing the emotion, but also allowing people to see the specific elements that you've designed in the space, right? So I'm always trying to highlight those things, what I've specifically designed in that space that I find is important, but also how do I make you feel something that I want you to feel or experience in that space.
Shadows.
Yeah, because they're one and the same thing, right? When there's light, there'll be shadow. There won't be shadow without light. They're one and the same thing. Yeah.
So you see that if someone either hates our work or love our work, like if someone doesn't like your work, how do you deal with that? Do you use it as a step to the next process? Like you use it as a statement to like hate it until you love it.
Yeah, I think I'm also a weird person because I enjoy more hate than love for my work. I think when people don't like my work, I'm always like interested to why you don't like it, and let's have a conversation. Whereas when people are tooting your horn saying, oh, it's so amazing, it's so great, like you don't really learn as much from that as you do from people saying, I hate your work, right? So yeah, I think the worst thing is for someone to be like, cool, and then move on. Because you get nothing back. You don't know whether you've impacted someone's life, you made them think differently, or you've really upset them for the day, which maybe is what needed to happen for them on that day. So yeah, like, I'm always for some sort of reaction. You have to feel something. You know? Yeah. Yeah, let's go and then come to you. Yeah.
So I think the space is where you create and concept behind to experience it from those things and experience it.
So I think the easy thing would obviously be just go in and record the camera, right? But because I'm always starting my movies by questioning things, my first point would be what happens in that space, right? So what is the story? That story will then lead me to how I begin filming the space, right? So am I using the idea of rules of thirds? So I'm always showing either a piece of a space in the center or left-centered or right-centered, or, you know, what other ways can I begin framing the elements of the space? That'll also tell me what kind of lens do I need to use for the space, right? So am I using a very, am I using a lens with a short focal length because it's an intimate space, so I want you to be able to feel and see the elements, or am I using a lens that has a very wide focal length, right? Because I want you to feel, experience, I want you to experience the space in its entirety, right? So all starts from the story, and it's just about posing questions. You know, if it's a space that, again, some story happens in the space over a period of time, how do I capture that? You know, is it a long exposure shot? Is it, you know, a time-lapse shot? So, you know, like all of these things just stem from the questions and the stories that happen in the space. At the back, and then.
So I wanted to ask, as a filmmaker, to what extent does the medium of the film you're making influence the way you see and interact with architecture? Because creating a live action film is very different from creating a television stop motion, 2D animation, 3D animation. So the way you interact with those specific mediums, how much would you say it impacts the way you then view and interact with the architecture you're designing?
Yeah, I think that's something I'm still trying to figure out. You know, I think that's why in this talk I said I'm still posing questions, right? Because I mean, every time I make a new film, I learn something from the film that I want to sort of put into my architecture, right? But also the more I do that, is the more I learn about architecture, and the more I want to sort of take those things into the new project that I make, right? So I'm always trying to find the parallels between the two, because there are so many, and I'm still trying to see what that means for me as a creative, as an architect, as a filmmaker. I think overall though, filmmaking allows you to encompass so many different things. So literature, things that are visual, sound, all of these things into one output. And I'm always sort of trying to take those elements into the way I make architecture, right? Which is always the interesting part, but I don't always get it right. But it's an ongoing process. Yeah, and then you have a question?
So I just wanted to ask, like, with all the industries, how do you find a balance with the different aspects that people
No, I don't know. I'm figuring out, you know, like every day I'm trying to figure it out. I think I just like follow where my heart pushes me to go. You know, if I feel like I haven't made a film in a long time, then I push towards making a film. If I feel like I practice architecture now. I don't feel like an architect anymore. And I want to, do something that's more architectural based, But again, I'm saying that these things for me are the same thing, So yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Maybe I can just get rid of like the creative work, but you say it as a normal method you use to get rid of that.
Absorb as much things as possible. Like watch movies, read books, talk to people, absorb as much as possible. Feed your subconsciousness, a lot of things, because then something happens in your brain where it mixes up all these things and then boom, you've got this creative idea, right? So the more you feed yourself, the more you can bypass the creative one. If you're just watching TikTok videos, then you don't have much, I guess, but if you feeding yourself a lot of different things, then yeah. Oh yes, sorry, your time. Okay. Mampudi, so how do you move on from a concept you really believe in when it's clean and working, even if you feel it still has potential? I think, with your question that you're asking me, Mampudi, I've got a film that I've been trying to make now for 5 years, and I'm wondering if it's working or not. But what I've also learned in filmmaking is that it takes you a long time to make a film. And that's good because it forces you to keep testing the idea, right? You don't just think of it and then want to make it. You have to interrogate it, you have to experiment with it, ask people what they feel, how they think about what you're making. And that's all part of the process of making a concept work, right? So even if it may not be working this year, I mean, obviously for you guys, you can't take 5 years for one concept. But one day when you practice, time also helps you deal with your concept and making your concept work. Getting it sit sometimes, then revisiting it allows us to see the concept in a different sort of perspective. Hope that answers the question. Were there any other question online? Angela, the question of not being heard is a question of the audience. It's difficult to find ones out there that clicks. Any advice? Yeah, I don't have the answers, Angela. It's partly why I'm also angry, because I'm trying to find the answers. I'm trying to see how you can get your voice heard out there, But I think doing the work is a piece of advice I can give you. It's just do the work and put it out there. Don't be scared to hear what people think of your work, because you're doing the work not for yourself, it's for the world, right? So don't harbor ideas, don't keep ideas in, make them and let the world experience your work. Cool. I don't know if there's any more questions, if we're running out of time. I think, some of you continue the conversation after the talk, definitely can. I'm sure we've run out of time.
Yeah, just for the professionals and the talks, just so we don't keep them. I know many of them will have meetings and site visits and things. I want to just thank everyone. Thank you, Nipo, for joining us for these talks. I think it was really insightful, and I think that's also what these talks are aimed around, not just listening to the day-to-day architecture, but listening to design in general, whatever approach it might take, so that we can relate across industry. We can see what everyone's doing. We can understand what everyone's approaches are. especially nowadays with the changes of technology, with the changes of opportunity, I think it's very insightful to get the different viewpoints design can take. So thank you again for joining us for today. I think everyone enjoyed it. And we'll obviously see you back in class again. Just for everyone online, for everyone here, please do make sure you guys also attend tomorrow. Tomorrow we've got a banger of a lineup as well. We've got Philip Hollander from Houtlander Furniture Design coming here. Anyone who doesn't know who that is needs to read up a little bit more. Very, very famous furniture designer. We've got 3 architects, Jennifer Law, we've got Gregory Katz and Joy Campion-Smith as well. So we've got a really interesting lineup for tomorrow as well, which will conclude our industry talks. So thank you again for everyone joining. I hope you guys are finding the value in this, and we're excited to see you guys again tomorrow. Thanks everyone.